If you're looking to get a really nice filmic look out of your footage, Dehancer Pro is one of the best ways to achieve that. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to color grade your footage using Dehancer Pro, and I have a clip shot on a Blackmagic camera, a Sony camera, and my iPhone. So you'll get 3 examples of different cameras and how I pretty much was able to achieve this look. And if you're unfamiliar with Dehancer, this is a really powerful film emulation plugin, but more simply, it's just a really great color grading tool. And if you are interested in Dehancer, you can use promo code VICTOR to get 10% off of your purchase. So with that being said, let's get into it. All right, everyone, so now we are in DaVinci Resolve, and if you do have Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut, you can also purchase the plugin for those editing softwares. But the first thing we're going to want to do before we even get into Dehancer is go to File on the top left corner, and we're going to want to go to Project Settings, and then we're going to go down to Color Management on the left. And then you're going to want to make sure your color science is set to DaVinci YRGB and your timeline color space is Rec 709/A. Once you're done, you can just click save. That's just a way to make sure that your export is going to match what you're looking at as your color grading. Now we're going to go to the bottom and click that little color tab. And then at the top where it says clips, I'm just going to click that so I have a little bit more screen space, so that way you can see it a little better. And the first thing we're going to do is press Option S. I'm going to press it 2 times. So that way I can create 2 different nodes. So on these first and second nodes, if I do want to make any changes to, say, the highlights, the temperature, the shadows, anything like that, I'll make it here. But on this third node is where I'm going to add Dehancer Pro. So I'm going to click Effects at the top right corner, and then Dehancer will be at the very bottom. And I'm going to click Dehancer 7.2, the latest version, drag and drop it onto the third node. So now, as you can see, it looks really intimidating, but don't worry, I'll walk you through the stuff you need to know. The first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna scroll down and turn film grain off. Now I can go up to input, and for my source, because this was shot in log on the Blackmagic camera, I'm going to click choose camera. For the vendor, it'll be Blackmagic Design. I shot it on the 6kG2 in Gen 5. And as you can see, it already made a huge difference to my log footage. I'm just gonna toggle it on and off. And then now you can see the exposure comp, temperature, and tint. And again, I don't touch any of these because if I do want to adjust any of those, I would do it in the first node. I just find that I get better results that way. But I actually like how it's exposed and the white balance and everything. So I'm just gonna go back to Dehancer Pro, and now we have film. So this is gonna be your film stock. And if you toggle this on and off, you can see right now that's just basically a Rec 709 format. And then once you enable it, this is where you're gonna get your stylized film stock. And there are a bunch of different options, so it's best just to kind of like go through and select which one that you want. And one of my personal favorites is Fujicolor Superia 1600. And I also like Fuji Natura 1600. So both of them are pretty similar. I think Superia just lifts the shadows just a bit, as you can tell. So that's what it looks like with just the film, and it looks pretty good in my opinion. And next up, you have Film Developer. So this is really cool if you want to maybe boost up your contrast or even drop it a little bit, and color boost if you do want to saturate it. But for this sake, I don't want to do that. For now, I'm just gonna drop the contrast boost just a tad, just so I can see a little bit more of the detail in this tree. Next up, for film compression. This is also one of the newer tools from Dehancer Pro. The reason I really like this is because once you enable it, just look at the skyline. As you can see, what it's doing is basically compressing the highlights in the skyline. So it's almost like a nice little highlight recovery for your footage. And then you can adjust the impact of it. I typically leave the impact white point the same, but tonal range you can kind of adjust. And I think right there is a pretty good point because now you can really see the blues in the sky. On my mouse, I'm just gonna scroll to zoom in. And then color density, I boosted that up to 100 and it brought up the oranges in the skies just a tad. So that looks pretty good so far. And then now under expand, I don't really mess with this too much, but you can lift your black point or drop your black point and your white point. I find that the film developer is actually really helpful with doing that. I'm actually gonna bring it up just a little bit. That looks pretty good. And next up is print. This is one of the layers that will make a huge impact on the look of your footage. So it starts off at linear, but these bottom 3 are where you're gonna get that nice style and that nice punchy look. So we can look at Fujifilm 3513. As you can tell, that looks pretty good. That's how it looked before. That's how it looks with Fujifilm 3513. And then maybe 2383. A little bit less green, which I actually kind of like that 3513 kind of like brings up my greens. And we have Kodak Endura Glossy Paper. This is still kind of like a Rec 709 look, but it tends to just bring everything down a little bit compared to linear. But I'm actually feeling 3513 for this one. So that looks pretty good. As you can see, I filmed this in winter, so I feel like it's kind of just only right that it has a little bit of a cooler tone, but we're gonna adjust those a little bit later. Target white, I kind of just leave alone, but as you can see, if you look at the sky and the clouds, it's kind of making them warmer or cooler. I'm just gonna leave that as is. Exposure, you could boost it up or down if you'd like. And then tonal contrast, again, this is gonna kind of like if you want it more contrasty or if you want to bring it up. So I'm just gonna leave that at 0. Color density, it's really only impacting the blue in my backpack and my jacket. So I'm just going to kind of leave that as is. All right, and next up is color head. So as you can see, the first thing you're gonna do, make sure you can use it, is enable it. Now it's basically giving you a little slider to adjust if you want your footage to have like a different hue. And I actually like it when it kind of looks a little bit more towards yellow. And now, as you can see, it kind of brings a little bit more yellows, just a little bit of warmth into my footage. And I'm actually going to adjust the temperature just a tad. There we go. Looks pretty good. So typically I don't touch these a lot. As you can see, it's kind of easy to go super crazy with them. So if anything, if you do want to make a little bit of a look, I would just go up to like maybe 5 or -5. I actually do like using these sliders, the shadows, tones, mid-tone, and highlights. So as you can see, when I boost up the shadows, it's making my greens a little bit warmer or cooler. Warmer actually looks kind of nice. So I'm gonna do that. And next up is film grain. You can enable that. And then under profile, you can pretty much choose which type of grain you want. So essentially, like the higher the ISO, the more grainy that your footage will look. And the lower ISO, the less. And 8mm grain is gonna be a little bit more larger. Then if you go to say 16mm at 50, it's gonna be a little finer. Going all the way to 65mm, which is like large format IMAX, it's going to be even more fine. So I'd probably want to use large format because I feel like when the grain is larger looking, it just kind of makes the image look muddy, but that's up to your preference. And then next up is halation, which basically halation, it's going to give some of the brighter parts of your image like this orange glow, as you can see. And for this case, if we do want to go for a filmic look, that actually looks pretty nice. And like film grain, if you do 8mm, the effect is going to look super strong. If you do 35mm, it's going to be a little bit more subtle. 65, it'll be really subtle. And then on any of these, if you do want to do custom, you totally can and adjust every single part. But I personally like using the presets because I feel like they're actually pretty good. I do like 65 to 70mm. That looks pretty subtle and nice. All right, next up is bloom. So I'm just going to enable that. And what bloom is gonna do, it's going to give your footage like this little glow. So I'll leave that on, get this nice filmic look. Film damage, film breath, gate weave, overscan, and vignette. I'm going to kind of pair all of those together because they're all kind of similar and basically they just are ways of enhancing the film effect. If you want film damage and you want to look like you can see those scratches on your footage, that's how you can do that. Film breathe is basically going to have this little flicker. Gate weave, basically it's going to crop in a bit and it's going to give your footage like a little bit of a jitter, which you might have seen this when you're looking at a movie shot on film. It looks almost kind of like it's shaking. Overscan is kind of cool because you can basically give yourself those film borders if you like, and they have a few different options. You can also do vignette, which basically it's going to create a little bit of a darkness around the borders of the frame. So now I'm finished color grading my footage. Here's how the final look turned out. As you can see, it looks pretty good. It looks filmic, but it's also just an overall nice color grade. And then these bottom three: monitor, output, LUT generator, and options. So monitor, basically if you do want to check false color, you can do so with that. I personally don't use it, but it's there if you need it. And then for output, you can adjust the intensity of your look. So maybe if you do want it a little subtle, but I always keep it at 100%. LUT generator is actually really cool. If you do like this look that you created, it will give you your own LUT. I won't deep dive into it for this video, but if that is a feature that you want to see a tutorial on, feel free to let me know. And then for options, you can adjust the quality. High slow is going to give you the best quality, but it's probably going to be a lot harder on your computer. I stick to normal fast and I haven't had any issues. And then check profile, just click this every once in a while and then it will allow you to update and add whatever new profiles for the film, the cameras, and the print media. And next up is this talking head clip. So again, I'm just going to click Option S a couple times. And then I'm going to drag and drop Dehancer Pro. This one I shot on my Sony FX3, so I'm going to select Sony. It looks pretty dark because this was a contrasty looking image, so we'll fix that right now. Next thing, I'm going to go to film, and another one of my favorites is Portra 160 VC. And I'm not going to adjust my exposure in Dehancer. I'm going to go to my first node and make some changes. Let's lift up the shadows a bit and drop the highlights a tad. The lift, I'm going to boost a bit as well. So there we go. We're already at a pretty good point. And now for film developer, I'm just going to enable that. And right now, I don't think I want to boost the contrast too much. And the color boost, maybe let's just boost that a tad. Now for film compression, this is going to be pretty important to this shot. I'm going to zoom in, and as you can see my face, the brightest parts are like my forehead and my cheeks. So I'm going to enable film compression. As you can see, it brought it down a little bit. And then total range, I'm going to bring to the right. As you can see, it basically kind of like levels everything out just a little bit, which is nicer. Expand, I'm not going to touch for this one. And then let's go to print. You might be thinking, dang, this image looks like it's unsavable, because that's what I actually thought too. But once you go to print, let's go to Kodak 2383. And boom, there we go. We're actually already at a pretty good spot. That looks really good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to just drop the tonal contrast a bit, just so it's not as crunchy. Boost the exposure just a tad. There we go. And let's check out the color head real quick. Do we want to adjust anything there? I actually do want to boost my midtones. What it's doing is kind of giving me like a little bit of a warm look on my laptop, the desk, and my skin. Also, I do feel like you can see kind of a lot of my blemishes on my skin. So to smooth it out, I'm gonna go to the first tab and I'm gonna just drop the mid detail a tad. I'm gonna boost the midtones to like 30. I'm not gonna do film grain on this shot because I already kind of had to push the shadows a little bit. So if I just add film grain, I think it's just gonna look like a noisy image. We can add the halation in a bit, and let's add some bloom in there. And where it says amplify, I'm just gonna bring it down a little bit so it's a little bit more subtle. I'm gonna skip these, and there we go. We have a nice and contrasty talking headshot. All right, next up is one of my personal favorites, an iPhone shot. And this was in the Philippines in a moment anamorphic lens. So this was a really cool nighttime scene. So add our nodes, drag and drop Dehancer on there. And one cool thing, because my iPhone 15 just shoots in a regular Rec 709 profile, I don't have to do anything for this camera input. I'm just gonna leave that as is. Now for the film, I'll show you another one of my personal favorites, Portrait 800, and as you can see, it's kind of giving like a nice flat look, but we'll actually adjust that now in the film developer. So for the film developer, we're going to boost the contrast a tad. There we go. And then we're going to boost the colors a little bit as well. There we go. Film compression. Basically all film compression is doing in this scene, since it wasn't a bright day, is bringing down the compression on the light, but I actually kind of like the little glow that that light creates. So I'm going to leave film compression off for this one. Expand, I'm not going to touch. And now for print, I'm going to select Fujifilm 3513. And there we go. We already have a pretty nice looking image, but we'll do a little bit more things to it real quick. For color head, we're just going to enable this, and it's looking really blue, which looks nice. But to counteract that just a little bit, for the shadows tone, I'm going to bring that to the right to kind of make it a little warmer. It's still looking just a tad blue. So what I'm going to do for the yellow blue, I'm going to drag that a little to the left. And now it's looking a little bit green. So for the magenta green, drag that a little bit that way. There we go. Cyan red, I'm going to leave as is. And let's leave off film grain because this iPhone footage is probably already a little bit grainy. But we'll turn on halation. Let's turn on bloom. And I don't want to do any of these. And one last thing, for the temperature, it's still looking a little bit cool. So I'm going to go into my first node and I'm just going to bring the temperature up a tad. And now I turn my ungraded Rec 709 iPhone image into a nice, pleasing filmic look. All right, everyone, so that is how you color grade your footage using Dehancer Pro. Again, you can use promo code Victor to get 10% off of your purchase. I just want to say a huge thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cool. So that's it. There we go. We did it.